거를 알게 됐거든요. 그래서 태권도는 행복 그 자체입니다.
태권도를 해서 강해지니까 더 자신감이 올라가고 행복해요.
I believe Taekwondo is a blessing from heaven. It has made us hopeful for the future. Every day, we're excited to see what's in store for us tomorrow. Practice it with your family. Taekwondo brings happiness.
It's April 17th here in Seoul, and I'm Kim Dami. We begin with the stories making the headlines at this hour, starting with Jerome Powell's warning over Trump's tariffs. The head of the U.S. Federal Reserve says tariffs by the Trump administration will hit the U.S. economy and push prices up, while stressing the Fed's patience on rate cuts. As we come on air, the Bank of Korea decided to leave the interest rate as it is at 2.75% in its third monetary policy meeting of the year, over volatile exchange rates for the Korean won against the greenback due to trade uncertainties. A South Korean-led consortium has sealed a contract to carry out an initial design phase for a U.S. research reactor project, marking the very first export of South Korea's reactor technology to the U.S. The Fed chief has voiced concerns and warnings of higher prices and weaker growth, all because of U.S. President Donald Trump's tariffs. But he did note the central bank will wait and see about future policy moves. Our Park Kwon-woo has our top story.
Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell has warned that the Trump administration's recent tariff policies could pose risks to the U.S. economy.
The level of tariff increases announced so far is significantly larger than anticipated, and the same is likely to be true of the economic effects, which will include higher inflation and slower growth.
Speaking at the Economic Club of Chicago on Wednesday, Powell said the tariffs are highly likely to cause at least a temporary rise in inflation, adding the impact could be more persistent. While the Fed aims to find a balance between keeping inflation at around 2% and maximizing employment, Powell said tariffs are leading the Fed to move away from those goals.
We will balance our maximum employment and price stability mandates, keeping in mind that without price stability, we cannot achieve the long periods of strong labor market conditions that benefit all Americans.
However, Powell also said the central bank will remain patient, holding off on any policy changes until it has a better understanding of how the current trade policies play out. Following Powell's remarks, U.S. stocks tumbled on Wednesday. The tech-heavy Nasdaq dropped more than 3%, while the S&P 500 and Dow Jones Industrial Average also fell by several hundred points. Also on Wednesday, gold prices soared, once even hitting an all-time high of $3,350 per ounce. Park Kwon-woo, Arirang News.
And ahead of South Korea's turn for tariff talks with the U.S. scheduled for next week, Japan began its own negotiations with Washington on Wednesday, now with the surprise attendance by Trump. Lee Seung-ja has more.
Top trade officials from Japan arrived in Washington on Wednesday for tariff negotiations with their U.S. counterparts. Tokyo hopes to lower the reciprocal tariff rate of 24% and receive tariff exemptions on steel and automobiles. Japanese Economic Revitalization Minister Ryosei Akizawa, who's leading the talks for Tokyo, expressed optimism before, saying the two countries could have good negotiations that will lead to a win-win situation for both sides. U.S. President Donald Trump also joined in on the trade talks with Japanese officials. Trump took to his social media platform to announce that he would be joining Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent and Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick in discussing tariffs and trade. After the talks, Trump wrote on his social media page that it was a great honor to have met with the Japanese delegation, adding that there was big progress made during the talks. Trump's decision to get directly involved in the negotiations also comes as he hinted at a desire to cover issues, including the amount Japan pays towards the cost of stationing U.S. soldiers in Japan. Despite Bessent stressing that there's a first-mover advantage, with more than 75 countries requesting trade talks, Japanese Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba said earlier this week that Tokyo won't rush to reach a deal, nor does it plan to make major concessions. With South Korea set to hold talks with the U.S. soon, all eyes are on Wednesday's trade talks between Washington and Tokyo, as they could be a litmus test of what's to come for upcoming negotiations. 이승재, Arirang News.
This morning, South Korea's central bank held its benchmark interest rate steady at 2.75% as widely expected. It announced a decision on Thursday following the third Monetary Policy Committee meeting of the year, taking a break from a rate-cutting cycle after a 25 basis points cut in February. Unstable exchange rates for the Korean won against the greenback amid trade and political uncertainties had fueled expectations for the rate freeze. Earlier this month, the exchange rate between the won and the U.S. dollar peaked at its highest in 16 years before plummeting to its lowest for the year. Now, let's delve deeper into the central bank's latest monetary call with Professor Lee Yoon-soo this morning. Welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us. So, didn't we see the rate freeze coming, Professor?
Yes, the rate freeze was actually widely expected. According to a recent survey, 88% of bond market experts predicted that the BOK would hold the policy rate at 2.75%. Of course, there are rising concerns about slowing economy and trade risk. But several factors the rate got very difficult at this time. We have seen volatility in the exchange rate. Some days the won more than 31 against the dollar. In such environment, cutting the rate would add pressure to the won and lead to the capital outflow. Also, the U.S. Fed chairman Powell has made it clear that the Fed is in no rush to cut the rate. They will wait until the uncertainty starts. So widening the Korea-US rate gap would also be very key for the Bank of Korea. On top of that, household is rising again, and prices have started to pick up, especially Seoul, city of Seoul, then reinstated land transaction permit system. That policy reversal contributed to the renewed speculation in housing market and added to concerns about the financial imbalances. So these developments ultimately supported a case for holding the rate steady in this meeting.
Although the rate freeze was a widely expected one, a rate cut could have also made sense considering the current economic situation. But today's rate freeze also came largely due to the volatility because of Trump's tariffs, right?
Right. It might have seemed appropriate given the slowing economy, but the Bank of Korea had to weigh other risks. First, financial stability. The BOK wasn't only concerned about trade tensions or tariffs. They also had external risk like exchange rate volatility and also internal risk, particularly the rising household debt for financial stability. Right now, the Korean won has been quite unstable, and cutting rate would put further downward pressure on the currency, especially when U.S. rates staying high. At the same time, household debt growing again, and the housing market has shown signs of overheating. So in the Bank of Korea's view, the risk of feeling more financial instability, both in the market externally and household debt internally, was greater than the benefit of easing policy to support the economy. I think that's why they chose to hold the policy rate for now.
Well, I think we are all on the same page when it comes to a great need for economic stimulus. That is why the government is pushing for an extra budget, right?
Yeah, the government is pushing for a supplementary budget, but not only because the economy is weak. One important reason that we have to remember is that the original 2025 budget was shortly cut during the National Assembly review process at the end of last year. The final version passed without bipartisan agreement, and over 1 trillion won was removed, impacting welfare, funds, AI, and disaster relief program when we had a very severe fires in the larger mountain areas in Korea. That's quite unprecedented in Korea's history, in recent financial history. So I think the extra budget is also about filling the gap, but it's aimed at stabilizing short-term demand and protecting key sectors under pressure from tariffs.
I see. Well, we do know that that will tame the local economic situations here in the country. And also, the South Korea is looking to solve tariff issues in the coming week. What else, other than tariffs, matters to stabilize the local economy then?
Tariffs are a major issue, but they are not the only one. One key factor is the U.S. Federal Reserve. Fed Chair Jerome Powell has made it clear that the Fed is in no rush to cut rates.
Right.
If the Fed keep rates high, that limits the BOK's room to maneuver without currency outflows. Domestically, financial risks are rising, especially with household debt and renewed concerns in the real market. More, we also need to look at Korea's long-term structural challenges. Boosting productivity, creating new growth engines, and supporting innovation in sectors like green tech and AI are all critical. A stabilized economy isn't just about risk, I think. It also means laying the ground for the next phase of growth. In that sense, structural reform will be a very important factor in near-term stimulus.
So a rate freeze for now. Professor, do you think a rate cut is possible or even necessary at the next monetary policy meeting in May?
Yes, I'm not sure about a necessity, but a rate cut in May is possible. The BOK is already in an easing cycle, as Bank of Korea governor mentioned yesterday. So this isn't just a one-off pause forever, but part of a broader cautious shift toward more accommodating policy. If economic data continues to weaken as we expect now, and external conditions stabilize as we hope, the case for a rate cut could grow stronger. That said, the BOK is clearly moving very carefully. They are watching the Fed monitoring the exchange rate, eye on household debt and the property market for internal financial stability. So while the direction of policy is clearly easing, the pace depends on how global and domestic risk evolve over time. But I would say that if current trends continue, a cut in May is definitely on the table.
Alrighty, Professor Lee, thank you so much for taking your time to be with us this morning. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
A South Korean-led consortium has won a contract for the initial phase of a U.S. research reactor project. Now, the consortium is made up of the Korea Atomic Energy Research Institute and Hyundai Engineering, as well as the U.S. nuclear power engineering firm NPR. According to the Ministry of Science and ICT, the consortium signed a deal with the University of Missouri to conduct the initial phase of the Next Generation University of Missouri Research Reactor project. With the deal, South Korea becomes the first country to reverse export technology in the field 66 years after importing research reactors from the U.S. with Trigo Mark II in July 1959. The sprint to the Liberal Party ticket to the top office is officially in full swing now, with the three contenders from the Democratic Party vowing to run a fair race in their first gathering on Wednesday. Shin Ha-young reports.
As the Democratic Party kicks off its primary race for the 21st presidential election, its three preliminary candidates pledged to compete fairly and come together after the race. On Wednesday, former party leader Lee Jae-myung, Kim Kyung-soo, former Gyeongsang-do Province governor, and Kim Dong-yeon, current Gyeonggi-do Province governor, made their first joint appearance since registering for the primary.
For a better life for the people and a hopeful future, the DP and our candidate, whoever that may be, must win this election.
I hope this primary will be a chance to fully showcase the DP's experience and capabilities.
I will give my best through fierce competition and come together to bring real change, beyond just a change in government.
Starting Wednesday, the party will run 4 primaries through April 27th. Chungcheong-do, Gyeongsang-do, Jeolla-do provinces, and the Seoul metropolitan area alongside Gangwon-do province and Jeju. During the regional primaries, dues-paying party members and party delegates will cast their votes, which will account for 50% of the total in selecting the presidential candidate. On the last day in each region, the voting results will be announced. Public polls will be conducted for 2 days, sometimes between April 21st and 27th, and these will account for the remaining 50%. The final candidate will be confirmed on April 27th. All three candidates are focusing their policy visions on the economy. Lee Jae-myung's think tank officially launched on Wednesday, outlining a national vision that aims for 3% potential growth, becoming one of the world's top 4 exporters, and creating a gross national income per capita of $50,000 by 2030. Kim Kyung-soo announced his economic policy focused on boosting the AI industry and promoting balanced regional growth, promising 100 trillion Korean won, around $70 billion, in public-private investment over the next 5 years to secure AI leadership and drive industrial change. Kim Dong-yeon, meanwhile, has been emphasizing the so-called 5 big deals to differentiate his economic policies, which includes focusing on balanced regional growth, climate change, and tax reform. Shin Ha-young, Arirang News.
And the contender list for the People Power Party has been now narrowed down to 8 from the initial 11. The PPP's race will be quite a competitive one, as only 4 of the 8 will make it to the second round. Our Kim Do-yeon has the details.
After closing the registration for the presidential primary, the People Power Party on Wednesday named 8 contestants after cutting 3 of the registered but not well-known names for not being up to the public's expectations and standards. As expected, the 8 are Kim Mun-soo, the latest labor minister, 5-term lawmaker Na Kyung-won, 4-term lawmaker An Chol-soo, former lawmaker Yang Yang-ja, Incheon Mayor Yu Jung-bok, Gyeongsang-buk-do Province Governor Lee Cheol-woo, former PPP Chair Han Dong-hoon, the latest Daegu Mayor Hong Jun-pyo. The chair of PPP's election committee emphasized that it'll manage a fair election.
As election committee chair, I will work with my team to ensure each candidate can freely present their vision in an open, energetic atmosphere. Through honest debate, we aim to select a candidate the people can truly trust to lead the nation.
Without a clear frontrunner, a fierce competition awaits the contestants, but some touch of fun awaits as well to garner support from the young generations. This includes heart monitoring during debates, speed round questions, and self-introductions based on MBTIs. All in all, however, Hwang emphasized party unity amid what could be seen as an uphill battle, an election after its former president was impeached.
Harmony and unity are our core values. To win the public's trust, every candidate must unite, work together, and move forward as one team.
Meanwhile, the 8 contestants released their pledges and were doing media interviews on Wednesday. However, an unexpected key figure was in the spotlight. Seoul Mayor Oh Se-un, who pulled out from the primaries, became a popular person to meet. Starting with dinner with Hong Jun-pyo on Tuesday night, the Seoul mayor met with Kim Mun-soo on Wednesday for breakfast, Na Kyung-won in the morning, and An Chul-soo for lunch. The candidates emphasized their visions aligned with the mayor's, which was focused on growth and helping the weak initially when he launched his campaign. This is largely seen as a message to Oh's supporters as he's not in the race anymore. Meanwhile, Han Dong-un visited Daegu on Wednesday. Daegu is a conservative stronghold with many eligible electors that account for 50% of the final votes. Meanwhile, after a media day for the candidates on Thursday, series of debates will be held through the weekend. Based on the debates, 4 will survive the cutoff for the next round starting April 22nd. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
Time magazine has named South Korea's former Democratic Party leader Lee Jae-myung and BLACKPINK's Rosé in its 100 most influential people of 2025. In the list revealed on Wednesday, Lee was included in the leaders category, along with U.S. President Donald Trump and UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer. Lee was described as the clear favorite to win the upcoming presidential election. Rosé from K-pop girl group BLACKPINK was also named in the Pioneers category. She was recognized as a dynamic performer and songwriter, praised for captivating massive audiences both as a soloist and a group.
Good morning, I'm Choi Ji-hee, and this is The World Now. In the UK, the Supreme Court has made a landmark decision regarding the legal definition of a woman. According to the ruling under the Equality Act 2010, woman refers exclusively to biological sex, excluding transgender people. The unanimous ruling on Wednesday local time stems from a legal challenge by the feminist advocacy group for Women Scotland against the Scottish government's inclusion of transgender women in a 2018 law that mandated 50% female representation on public boards. The court ruled that the definition of a woman should only include biological females. It said that interpreting the definition to include individuals based on gender identity would make the Equality Act inconsistent. However, the decision does not revoke existing protections against discrimination for transgender individuals. Women's rights groups lauded the ruling as a reaffirmation of sex-based rights, while LGBTQ+ organizations expressed concern and disappointment. The French government has announced the expulsion of 12 Algerian diplomatic staff following Algeria's decision to expel 12 French diplomats. This comes after France arrested an Algerian consular official suspected of links to a kidnapping. On Wednesday local time, France's foreign affairs minister said France will expel 12 Algerian diplomatic and consular officials in France and recalled its ambassador from Algiers for consultations. This move comes after Algeria decided to expel 12 French diplomats after France detained an Algerian consular agent linked to a kidnapping case. In 2024, an activist and influencer known as Amir DZ, a critic of the Algerian government, was abducted near Paris and released the following day. French prosecutors have charged 3 Algerian nationals, including the consular official, with kidnapping and terrorist conspiracy. Russian President Vladimir Putin on Wednesday met with 3 former hostages held by Hamas who were released in late 2023 and February of this year. Speaking to Alexander Trufanov, who had been held by Hamas in Gaza for 498 days, Putin pledged to continue efforts to secure the release of remaining hostages. Putin also acknowledged years of stable relations with Palestinian representatives as pivotal in facilitating the release of the hostages and extended gratitude to Hamas for what he termed a humanitarian act. Trufanov, whose father was killed during the October 2023 Hamas attack, appealed to Putin to persistent efforts to free others still in captivity. Finally, astronomers have identified a new planet located approximately 120 light years from Earth that resembles Tatooine, the home planet of Luke Skywalker in the Star Wars movie. The planet appears to orbit a pair of brown dwarfs, or what experts call failed stars, that are too small to shine like the sun. What makes this planet special is that it moves in a completely different direction from how the two stars orbit each other, referred to as a polar orbit. Although the planet was not directly seen, scientists spotted its presence by watching the movement of the stars. The author of the study, an astronomer from the University of Birmingham, said there aren't many very young planetary systems like this. This research was published in the journal Science Advances on April 16th.
We had a warmer start to the day. Morning temperatures were nearly 10 degrees Celsius higher in the capital this morning, and the warmth will linger through the afternoon. But temperature gaps will be wider for inland regions. Chungcheong could be seeing a gap of 15 degrees Celsius within a few hours. So get ready to feel quite warm, even a little hot for some of us this afternoon. Daejeon could have a taste of summer with temperatures climbing all the way to 27 degrees Celsius. Seoul topping out at 24 degrees, Daegu at 25 under mostly sunny skies with decent air quality nationwide. But it's going to be another windy day with a wind advisory being in place for Jeju Island. Now we have a rainy weekend ahead again. Rain that starts on Saturday morning will gradually spread to the rest of the country, continuing by Sunday morning. So please take the rainy weather into account and plan accordingly for your weekend.
That is all we have for this morning. Arirang News will be back at 5 p.m. Korea time. Thanks for watching.
A country where traditional and modern cultures coexist.
Where you can explore spectacular landscapes and nature.
Savor the delights of traveling at every turn.
Where? Korea, of course.
There are some must-visit places in Korea. Ones that appear in every tour guidebook: Hangang River, Gyeongbokgung Palace from the Joseon Dynasty, and
Yes, these are essentials, but I want to go somewhere a little different. I don't have to follow the guidebook. For example, filming locations for K-pop music videos or K-dramas and movies.
Traveling is all about taking it slow. A long walk at your own pace or even zoning out somewhere quiet. Doesn't it sound relaxing?
You travel for the experience, trying something new in a foreign place, de-stressing and making lifetime memories, taking tons of pictures along the way.
70% of the Korean territory is mountainous. Naturally, hiking is a very popular pastime in Korea. Not your kind of activity? Trust me, the view will make the effort worth it. Just catch your breath by the cold stream in the valley.
Korea is surrounded by the sea on three sides. From the beach, you can enjoy a wide open view as well as various water activities. But the riverside is great too. There's plenty to see and do.
If you're in Korea, you can't miss the night view full of dazzling lights.
Yes, even the same place can have a totally different vibe at night.
Want to make unforgettable memories?
How about traveling to all corners of Korea? Join us next time to explore more about Korean culture.
We're here to bring a new type of news show. New insights, new styles, and new topics every day.
We are News Generation.
Bring news just for you. It's Thursday, April 17th here in Seoul. I'm Song Yu-jin, and you're joining us on News Generation. Joining us this Thursday is Cheska Dae-hong. Happy Thursday, everyone. Happy Thursday. And Julian Kim.
Happy Thursday and good morning, everyone.
Good morning. Now, both are here to speak on behalf of those in their 20s and 30s. We're going to begin with our keyword news. Our keyword for this Thursday is clothes. Now, climate change is shaking up what we wear and when we wear it. Here in Korea, when we've long been proud of having 4 distinct seasons, the fashion industry is feeling the impact of shrinking spring and fall seasons and longer summers and winters. Major department store chains like Lotte, Shinsegae, and Hyundai are reporting lackluster growth growth in apparel sales. Now, spring usually kicks off with strong sales between February and March, but this year, the on-year increase was below 1% compared to the 6 to 7% growth in previous years. And industry insiders say it's tied to the weather, because in February, Korea saw its coldest temperatures in a decade, and March was sort of like a weather roller coaster with everything from snow and sudden temperature dips to t-shirt weather, making it hard to dress for the season. So Julian, did you also find yourself standing in front of your closet, not knowing what to wear because of the unpredictable weather? What would you say?
Yes, well, in general, I always find myself standing in front of a closet, spending way too much time deciding what to wear. Even just this morning, I spent a good 5 minutes in front of my closet deciding what to wear before coming to the studio today. But now, Koreans have a lot of pride in having 4 different seasons, but that comes at a cost. Having to have 4 different outfits, ranging from having like really thick winter clothes to really thin summer clothes too. So therefore, every season we have to do a swap of our clothes in our closet because these clothes take up so much space in our closet. But however, due to the weather roller coaster that we've been having the last few months, we've had to we had to change from our winter jackets to our thin summer t-shirts. So it's been really hard to decide, especially because in the mornings and nights, it gets really cold. And during the day, it's been so hot. So do I bring a thick parka? Do I just bring like a light jacket? How do you decide? I don't know.
I can totally agree. By the way, are you satisfied with your outfit choice today?
Yeah, I would say so.
And Jessica, is this also like a headache for you, choosing what to wear because of this roller coaster like weather? What do you say?
I think you described it perfectly when you said we had a roller coaster weather in March. And even just recently, it's almost end of April, mid-April, and we had snow.
Just 4 days ago, right?
What is happening? But it's not so much for me a headache of the outfit choices, but there's a growing concern seeing this type of weather and hearing reports about whether we're only going to have 2 extreme seasons coming up. My fear is that we're going to have a really, really long and quick summer that's upcoming very quickly, and the transition won't be smooth and will happen too quickly, and the summer would just take over what we're experiencing right now. So that is my fear at the moment, to be honest.
Because we're seeing the visible effects of climate change as every year goes on.
Right. And every year, as you know, because you report, every year they say this is the
hottest year on record.
Exactly. Hottest summer on record. And now, even before summer has come, there have already been reports that this year we're going to have another record summer. So I think climate change is real, everyone, and I think we really should do something about it.
Definitely. Now, meanwhile, fashion retailers are also bracing for what could be an early but extreme summer heat wave, as Jessica mentioned, with temperatures already creeping past 20 degrees Celsius in some parts of the country here in Korea. And that was our keyword news for this Thursday. So we're now going to move on to our main discussion of the day. Today, we're going to talk about a topic that's on the minds of our generation a lot recently. Here's more on today's topic. Death is something we all inevitably face, but often avoid discussing. While it might feel like a distant concept for many young people, there is a noticeable shift in how our generation is approaching this part of life. More of us are talking more openly about it, and in some cases, even preparing for it. So starting off, one profession that's really getting increased attention from younger people here in Korea is closely tied to today's topic. So Julian, can you tell us what kind of job we're going to talk about?
Yes, so I was honestly very surprised to learn more about this, but funeral directors are actually gaining a lot more attention from people in our generation. Now, this profession usually used to carry a lot of social stigma, so it is surprising to see this huge shift in our generation. But when you look at our current society right now, it does make sense. Now, Korea is entering a super age society, so this career has started to get more in the spotlight. In fact, 4 out of 10 people who acquired the certificate to be a funeral director are in their 20s and 30s, and students majoring in relating fields are also in their 30s as well. Now, there also has been a steady increase in funeral service subscriptions amongst the younger generation too. For example, in one particular funeral service company, the proportion of subscribers in their 20s and 30s rose from 17% 2021 to 30% 2023.
That's quite a change. Then, Jessica, I'd like to ask you, let's kind of connect the dots. How does this growing interest in funeral directors and funeral subscription services reflect a change in the way younger generations are thinking about death?
I think it's a truly very interesting question because death always came with a very negative, even fear-causing connotations. I mean, all of us would agree it's the symbol for the unknown, the end, and also the loss and the grief, right? And to give a little bit of Korean insight on how we view death, there's a Korean proverb that says, better a living dog than a dead lion. But if I give you a direct translation, there's a saying that goes, it's better to roll in dog poop than to live in, to live in the life. So people are very, very, very obsessed with life, and it's very precious for Korean people. And the more you try to hold on to one, I think people fear the other side. So in this case, because you care about life so much, you fear death that much, right? So I think in that case, what we're seeing is that some new trends are emerging in our new generation amongst the younger, particularly ours. And what better example than to have one of the panelists, which is myself. So I actually am very much immersed in death and try to think about it a lot, not only learning about it, but also experiencing it. So actually a couple of months ago, I followed the well-dying trend of our generation and went to the whole ritual of actually experiencing death. So that includes taking funeral photos, writing the will, and you wear this cloth that people wrap the dead body in, and you wear it, and then you just lay in the coffin while the funeral director actually does the whole procedure as if you're going through the funeral.
That sounds really eye-opening.
It was one of the most surreal experiences, but I have never experienced anything more real than that, if that makes sense. Because while you're laying there, and even when you're writing the will, people are crying and thinking about their loved ones, and you just have this silent moment to yourself, and then you realize that death is not really that far away, and also you're extremely calm when you actually face death. That's what I experienced. So I think in those moments, I think a lot of younger generation are trying to close that gap between what seems so far away and try to bring it closer, perhaps, so they feel more real about it.
Right, because it's kind of like an instinct for us to wanting to prevent or not talk about things that we're fearful of. But nowadays, we're seeing more people like you who are actually starting to confront and talk about death more openly.
Right, I think you said it perfectly. I think people wanted to keep that distance between death and then try to focus more on the present life and try to avoid it. But these kind of experiences, you're literally putting yourself in front of it. And when you do, I think you realize how precious your life is more.
Right, and expanding on what we've just talked about, another key part of today's discussion is the growing debate over euthanasia and assisted suicide. We actually talked about this topic a couple of times on Newsden too, but more people now argue that individuals should have the right to choose when and how they die, especially in cases of extreme suffering, for example, if you are grappling with a terminal disease. So Jessica, could you also walk us through this change in perception?
Yeah, and this is another very heated debate, but also very important question, I think, in our life. Opinions have always been divided on not only the, quote, right to life, but also to what extent, and the discussion has been ongoing, not just in Korea, but globally. So now here in Korea, if we take a look at the screen, we can see the reasons that people actually were for and supported assisted suicide. Now, according to a report by Korea Institute for Health and Social Affairs, 82% of those surveyed agreed to legalization of assisted suicide. Now, if you look at the reasons, the top one was to reduce meaningless treatment, as in people don't want to suffer for long-lasting treatment. And number two, as humans, we do have the right to claim our own death. And number three, to reduce the pain of death itself. And I think we can all kind of relate to these reasons, right? Because either we've seen someone suffer or thought about ourselves in pain at one point. And I think this is a particularly important topic for our generation, because last month there was also an essay book titled I Wish Today is Tomorrow. 오늘이 내일이었으면 좋겠다. And it was actually an essay written by a daughter who detailed the process of having her mother attend the assisted suicide program in Switzerland because she was in so much pain. And when you read the essay, she details the complicated process, the emotional burden, but also the pain that the mum was going through when she couldn't have the, quote, dignified death or the choice that she wanted. So at the end of it, she writes, I wish people could have more dignified death, unlike my mother. And on it, she wrote a quote, I know it's the biggest irony, but seeing her made me realize that having the choice of death can actually be a hope for life. And when I read it, I came much closer to how this assisted, dying program could, not always, but could actually assist someone's quality of life in some cases. Yeah.
Because I've heard some people saying that if you're in immense pain, living does not really feel like they're living.
Right. Living feels more closer to death than actually living, right? Yeah.
But on the other hand, euthanasia or assisted suicide is still a deeply controversial and emotional issue, as you mentioned in the first part of your answer. So, Julian, what are some concerns and counter-arguments?
Yeah, so there are growing concerns about using euthanasia. For example, in the Netherlands, where euthanasia is legal, there has been a noticeable rise in young people using it due to psychological suffering. This has sparked public debate of whether such decision is actually truly right or even ethical. Many experts have also voiced concern that discussions around legalizing assisted suicides are gaining momentum, even though education of what constitutes as good dying is still kind of lacking. In reality, even though if someone claims it as their personal choice, for example, if the decision is driven not by wanting to be a financial burden to the family, for example, it's really hard to consider this as a dignified death. And many argue that this is more of a coerced decision than a personal decision.
Right, so it may not be 100% based on your own choice, which is what many people are concerned about.
Exactly.
So for more opinions, we also asked our viewers through a poll on our Arirang News YouTube channel with the question, should euthanasia be legal? If we looked at the results, 71% answered yes, while 29% said no. And here are 3 comments from our viewers. Our first comment for this Thursday is by Rose 512. Yes, we deserve the right to choose a dignified and peaceful end to our lives. It's a matter of personal autonomy and compassion. SKDHJ66, no, because some people may feel pressure to request euthanasia by family, friends, or doctors when it isn't what they really want. That's so sad and is something that society should prevent. Endless Curiosity 95 says it's a complex issue, so before making a decision, we should discuss what kinds of safeguards we can put in place to avoid its misuse. Absolutely. So after the break, we'll connect with a young person from Spain for a more global perspective on today's topic. Stay with us.
NewsGen wants to hear from you. Go to YouTube and search our channel Arirang News. Click Community and leave a comment down below. Make a new type of news with us.
Joining us today is Spanish Gen Z Gabriel Ruiz Benito. Welcome back to the show, Gabriel.
Welcome. I'm glad to be back.
Thank you for joining us once again. So, Gabriel, we'd like to ask you, how do people your age in Spain generally view death? And can you really relate to what we discussed earlier in the show? What do you think?
Well, I can completely relate because I don't think this is about nationality. In Spain, the views are really divided on this topic. But most of us think that having a dignified death makes you live life in another way. Like, probably it's not that you're gonna take that decision, but knowing that if at some point you are in so much pain that you cannot like keep on, or like you have a very bad disease, you can end your life, or like you can choose to do it in a right way, in a painless way. Most Spanish people feel really better about that, having that option. Actually, in Spain, it's legal since 2021. But it's not being actually used a lot because it has some problems, legally speaking. So even though it's legal, it's not being actually being taken into account that much.
I think you partially answered the question, but I think legalization is also important. So is euthanasia or assisted suicide legally permitted in Spain? And what's the public opinion on this issue?
It is legal, but only in a very specific cases, which are very difficult to fulfill right now. You have to be proven not to have any hope of improvement in the illness that you're having, which is really difficult to medically prove. And also, you have to be over 18 years old. You have to request for it, and then you have to wait for 15 days in order not to change your decision. And 2 doctors have to actually give you medical permission for it and say that you are a person that it's okay to be done. So the public opinion towards this is really divided because, this is kind of a political issue and also a religious issue. And as you know, Spain is a very Catholic country. So religious people are not really supporting this law. So I will say that the Spanish population is 50-50 on this.
Yeah, so the idea of dying well is gaining attention nowadays. So how would you personally define this concept?
I personally define it as an answer of our generation to the fear of death. We are so much in this new trend of you have to look youthful, you have to live your life to the fullest, we are not really close to the part of ourselves of seeing us weak, seeing us in a bed, seeing us maybe even dying more alone because the tendency to not having families and so on is growing. So I feel people is really fearful of death. So they want to even control that part of their lives. Young people like to feel that they have everything under control. While I think older generations were more people will take care of me, or you had family and friends that will take care of you at those moments. The new generation is I don't know, I just want to have control over my death too. So we are more like a control freaks. So that's why we want to have control over our deaths as well.
That's a very interesting point. All right, Gabriel, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts today. We appreciate it.
I appreciate it too.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I mean, I don't know about you guys, but what really struck me is how young people, those who really seem farthest from death because of our age, are actually starting to have some very meaningful and deep conversations about it. So I want to ask you, what do you think is prompting more young people to really confront mortality?
I think that's a great question because we're in our peak of life, so-called, the 20s and 30s. And I even think about death a lot. I'm one of those examples. So I think broadly speaking, there are two factors. And one is that our generation prioritizes quality of life above all else. We don't want to survive. We want to thrive. We want to live fully, which is Gabrielle just mentioned. And I think that also means, quote, how do I die? And instead of having uncertainty and unpredictability happen to us, I think, and Gabrielle mentioned it perfectly, we want to be able to have choice, but also control.
Right.
And in order to have control, we have to know how to die and what dying really means, right? But also because of social media and widespread information, I think we frequent death more often than we actually think about because we hear about death and, accidents and suicide. And, our generation grew up with so many different incidents, tragic incidents that have happened. And I think these exposures make us think more deeply about what life really means, which translates to then what is death. Yeah.
Right, so more emphasis on quality over quantity.
Quality of quantity, for sure, yes.
What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, so for our generation, death is just being seen as part of our natural life. It's something that we recognize as something unavoidable, and our attitudes towards it are clearly shifting. But in my opinion, there are many factors to play with this one. Yes, chronologically, I guess we are further away from death, but that doesn't necessarily mean that death is something super distant from us.
Right.
I know many of my fellow Gen Zers can relate to this, but we started our adulthood in the midst of a global pandemic, increased climate anxiety, and ever more what feels like an increasingly unstable global world. And we started our adulthood seeing firsthand just how nothing is guaranteed. We can't prepare for anything in our future, and things can just change in a snap. So we're going to keep asking this question, what actually matters in our life? With constant exposure to loss on social media, growing mental health awareness, and evolving cultural values, it makes sense why we're reflecting really deeply on morality now. Especially in Korean society, many of us are expected to take care of our older family members. So this would inevitably force us to confront these questions early on than, let's say, later in life too.
And we want to be as prepared as much as we can.
Exactly.
And this is a question with no one-size-fits-all answer. I'm sure many of our viewers will relate to this, but I want to hear your thoughts in today's episode. What does dying well really mean to you?
I think that's a great question, and I would love to hear some answers from our viewers as well, because I think everybody has a different sort of definition.
Right.
But for me, there was a quote I wrote after my grandfather passed, and I said, grief is real, but so is life. And without death, life cannot be more real because it has an end.
And precious, right?
So precious, right? And I think about it from time to time, and it frightens me actually that death is something that is constantly looming over my presence and every day. But what I realized when I went through the funeral procedure and laying there in the coffin and writing my will and actually putting yourself in the position of what it means to face death, I realized there was a lot of peace and acceptance when you actually come face to face with it. So I think that's a life well lived when you can, at that moment, have that kind of serenity and acceptance. But I always say, if you want to have a good death, then you need to have a good life.
Right.
And in order to have a good life, you have to live fully. Yeah.
So live like today. Every day is your last day.
It's your last day. I think that's
live it to the fullest.
But I would hope that today isn't the last day.
Course.
But I will train my brain
that
to think,
mindset, right?
That mindset, yes.
Then Julian, how do you define dying well?
Yeah, I agree with everything that Jessica has said, but I was actually 16 years old when my grandpa passed away, and his passing really forced me to think about death, especially at such a young age. I feel that was the first time in my life where I actually had to sit there and process what death really means, not just for myself, but also for my loved ones too. And so let's fast forward a couple many years now, and that question, what does it mean to die well, is something I honestly don't fully have the answer to. My current life philosophy is live life to the fullest, like how we mentioned earlier, and have control of what I want to do in life. And I am honestly very privileged and blessed to be able to say that this is what I want to do and have the opportunity to do that and pave my own path. So I think it's really crucial to use those opportunities and become the better Julian I can every single day, like a little software upgrade every day if possible. But yeah, with my current experience, I would say dying well means just leaving a positive impact on my loved ones and friends, living a life full of gratitude, love, and being confident in what I do.
That's such a nice definition too.
Yeah, it took a long time to formulate that definition, but it will keep changing, I'm sure. Yeah,
and we're always open to sharing your thoughts. So if you have your own definition of dying well, please leave a comment below on today's episode. And that's all we have for today, but NewsGen will be back tomorrow at 10:30 a.m. Korea time. Special thanks to Jessica Dainho.
Pleasure's always mine. Thank you.
Thank you. And Julian Kim.
Thank you for having me today.
Thank you. And to our viewers, thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you tomorrow on Friday. We are
News Generation.
How to survive in Korea. One room. So, you're surviving in Korea. If you signed a contract for a one room, obviously you're a pro.